You're probably not an actor, but I bet at some time in your life you have done a take of something, and then done another one, and another retake. Why is this? Isn't the first time the most pure? I think so too. Um, but one thing that I wonder about is when you do the last take of something. I was listening to a podcast yesterday on the Blank Check podcast, and it was the episode Basic. And they were talking about not necessarily that film, but another film. And they talked about trying to get a take going. And it took about 18 takes. And the director, because he was too close to it, told the editor, do not tell me like what take it is that I'm going to use, because if I know that, I'm going to be biased and lean towards the 18th take. And so the editor didn't tell him. And the take that they actually did end up choosing was take 18. This is my third take on this episode. And why is that? You could even say fourth take, because I just had a false start where, I had to blow my nose. But the funny thing is that there is something about the first take that's the best. I got about 2.5 hours into this podcast without getting to the top 10 best picture winners. Yes, this is Film Gamer Podcast, episode number 28, season 3, episode 21. And you'd think I would have gotten used to a format by now, but I sort of haven't. I just kind of make it up along the way and hope I get there. On this episode, we'll be looking at the top 10 box office of this week and the aforementioned Best Picture winners, my personal top 10. Then I wanted to cover something on the Joe Rogan episode featuring Tucker Carlson on UFOs. So, without further ado, let me get down to it, because my first take was pretty pure. And then I said something that even I was kind of like, I get what he's saying, but do I want this on a podcast? And it wasn't like a personal life kind of thing. And it wasn't necessarily even a controversial opinion. It's even fading from memory as I say it now. But I was just kind of like, even I don't really want to hear this for me. So know that even though I'm doing my third take of this, it is the best, most genuine one. So this weekend, we had a real movie in theaters called Challengers. I say real movie because if you look at the rest of the top 10 top North American box office films, many of them are tied to franchises. We have one, two, three, four other movies out of the 10 that are tied to franchises, and fewer are even that original. At number one, we have Challengers. At number two, we have the latest Christian release by Lionsgate, Unsung Heroes. At number three, we have Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire sequel, part of a shared universe. Number four, we have Civil War, which I liked a lot. In fact, I liked it so much that I've taken my time on the review to the point where I missed my own deadline, which was at 8 o'clock p.m. when I started recording this. It is now 11:44, and I felt confident enough to delete my entire previous take. So know that I really care about it. And I care about it so much that it has taken me a while to write my review on Civil War, my full review. And good things, they take time. And that's why we don't, every night when I watch movies or watch TV or something, it's not always going to be good. When I stream, usually you can find a kernel of something, like a funny clip on YouTube or something, which is, I'd spend much of my time, right now I'm Twitter, I'm TikTok, I'm email for job opportunities, and I'm this podcast. And, that's basically the cycle of how I, do it. If I were, 12, I would, every week my parents would like rent something, and I would go to school and meet people. And then I would, after school, instead of doing my homework, play video games. And it was excellent, let me tell you. I don't want to say happiest moments of my life, because my happiest moments of my life will be when I like get married, and have somebody to go home to, which I've been preparing for my whole life for by doing absolutely nothing. In fact, right now I'm just sitting on my mom's bed because the room has the nicest sound quality in the upstairs, and drinking a beer, and you sitting on a boyfriend pillow, which frankly I like because it means that I can sit on a comfy, like the bed. Can you hear this? Yeah. Is the best for soundproofing. Better than my room, where I recorded part of last week's episode or the week before. And it's the most cushiony. And this bed is so big that it should record most of the sound waves. But yeah, um, when you think about it, and I'm recording this sitting on a bed, and then with the boyfriend pillow in there, and then I'm looking on my $1,000 laptop, which money well spent, except for the part where the video doesn't sync properly, and I just find that a very bizarre problem to have on $1,000 laptop, and know that I did send it in for a review, and that problem came after the warranty expired, or it did before, and I didn't notice and say anything, but I did send it in for warranty and get it fixed. And then I was gonna send it in for the buzzing that I heard, and then I thought, well, I just sent it in for warranty. Aren't I being too greedy? Which, no, if you spend money on something, there's no amount of care you can provide to it where you are being too greedy. Even the points when I felt like I was taking advantage necessarily of the seller or something, I thought, well, I'm gonna have this thing forever. They're gonna have me for a few minutes, and I've like when I sold stuff at Staples, there was this guy who was a friend of a girl that I liked, and uh, he no, he wasn't the guy who was a friend of a girl I liked. It was um, the brother of a girl that I liked, and I liked him. He was a great guy. And then it was like his dad, and his dad was a very intimidating guy. Let me tell you. And he came in and he's like, discount, right? And I'm just kind of like in my head, like, well, I'm not supposed to give to, but it's like, oh, I guess I can. Like, what's friends between two friends? You're my friend, or whatever. And I was intimidated. I'm like, I don't want to piss off this guy. But I've been in that thing where it's like, if you're a customer and you get like a whiff of like a discount, and you're like, I'm having this. I'm holding on to this. I'm strangling it. It's not getting out of my grip. That's what it was like for him. So I empathize with that. And I felt like very squeamish at the time, because I'm like, this guy doesn't deserve, this is a friends and family discount, and he is not my friend. I do not know him. I would even hesitate to call his daughter my friend. She's very friendly. We're friends. We went to high school together. So, for all intents and purposes, we are friends. If you and I went to high school together and we see each other at a party, doesn't matter if we've never hung out before, we're friends because we know each other, and friends are hard to come by. Also, men have a very low standard of friendship, of like in the 2 seconds, if we have something in common, under oath, I can easily lie and say that we're friends, and the act of me lying will make us friends. It's a complicated thing, male friendships, but basically, um, the bonds forged in male friendship are immediate and sturdy, but the female bonds in friendship that take friggin' forever to make. Like, if you're a woman, it's impossible to be friends with another woman. But like when you do finally make that bond, they apparently last forever and are stronger than male bonds. This I learned in my communications degree, which is the exact value of information of why I don't have a job yet. How did I get to this from talking about the box office? I have no idea. I guess I was just basically talking about how we spend our time now looking through a screen, and it's not that often that bonds are forged. So, the minutes of inconvenience that you take being a person, either selling or buying to somebody, are temporary to the things that last you forever. Uh, so that's the case. Was I taken advantage by that customer? Yeah, but they got what they wanted, and I'm fine with it. I don't work there anymore. Staples didn't lose significant amount of money from that. They made millions. And But I think about it a lot because, you know, we're good people. When you go and you buy someone, you don't want to be mean to somebody. You want to be a jerk, but you also want to get what you want. So it's like a really difficult thing. of being humane and being a person, but on top of that, like, um, ensuring your own happiness and security. And it's just kind of like a fascinating social dynamic, which is sort of the themes of this episode of how do we live now. So how we live now is we have a $55 million movie about tennis that's a romantic drama opening in theaters. And I didn't go see it because I know that eventually I'll be able to see it on streaming. And it's like a certainty. So why would I pay for it? Why do people go out and see movies in theaters? Well, I go out and I go see a movie in theaters because back then you wouldn't necessarily see it. Like, a movie comes out in theaters, and if you didn't see it, well, you could rent it. So we would rent movies, but there was no back catalog streaming service that you could like always turn to for like every movie ever made. People talk about particularly, oh no, this movie 28 days later was taken off Disney Plus. Now it's gone forever. Um, it's not because it's on DVD, and people are like, "Oh, this is why you should have physical media." And it's like, okay, well, what you should realize is that those movies that get taken off of streaming or aren't available on streaming, and there are a lot that I want to see. I have a list right now of movies that I would like to see, which are not available on streaming anywhere, nor are they available even on the library that I can go to rent stuff for free. Do I want to spend $5 to buy it on Amazon? Absolutely not. I've owned like 18 DVDs in my life. Um, but I do have a list of like an entertainment list of movies that I'd like to see. Um, One of them is Backdraft. Another is Cocoon. These are movies that I have never been able to see in my life that I would very much like to see, but they aren't available anywhere else. Cocoon is a 20th century Fox movie or a Disney movie. Nonetheless, they're owned by the same company, Disney, so they should be on Disney Plus. Why aren't they? I don't know. Rights, I guess. They don't like to pay if you put something on there. It's like running it on TV, so they have to pay the people who are involved, and in order to save money, they don't. And so there was like I guess a limited Blu-ray of that movie, which I can't find anywhere. Which now that I think about it, let me find it. Let me search for it on Facebook Marketplace, which is slowly becoming pretty cool and hasn't yet gone downhill yet. And well, do you know, there's another advertisement for Miller's Girl, which is the most mid-looking movie that I have seen. Every single person who talks about it, and I know they're not real people because it's the internet. Nobody is real on the internet. Only real life is real. Um, every single person says that movie is mid. But nonetheless, people like Jenna Ortega, I guess, and in every single stupid advertisement I see for it, which could just be a picture or something, but it's social media, so everything you can comment on. And like, the top comment is like, "What is Wednesday Adams doing? Oh my God!" It's like they're acting. We know this, but they gotta. Oh, it's just the way with social media. It's just, you know, I can't place blame on this because, you know, like I said, what have I done for the past week? My whole life is lived on a screen here. I'm looking for a job and then entertaining myself with social media and streaming. So, but the people who, like, I had a whole life, you could argue, before this where I would go outside and I would go to the movies, and I would rent movies, and I would watch them with people in person. And now everything can be done digitally. So now you have people who are growing up entirely based on that, like with very little interaction with other people. Maybe in some ways it's the same, in some ways it's totally cut off. But basically, you have these people who live their entire lives through a screen without the preamble that I had. And so their social awkwardness is like immense and robotic and frankly bizarre and off putting. But nonetheless, let me check and see if I can find Cocoon anywhere. I bet you that indie movie will show up. Nope, 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 nope. Can I look for it on Blu-ray on eBay.com? Because I just really want to see this movie. The annoying thing is, like, will it just be the, like, Yeah, $12.81 plus 18 plus $6 shipping won't work. Why? Because it's British. Okay, Cocoon widescreen bilingual, $8 plus two, so 10. I can get it for $10 on DVD if I really want to see it. The thing is, I'm only going to see it once, so that's really annoying. Yeah, double feature, Cocoon and Cocoon 2. Well, no, because Cocoon 2 probably sucks, because if it was really that good, it'd release in theaters. So this only got a freaking Blu-ray in, yeah, DVD, no scratches. That's great. Um, by the way, there shouldn't be any scratches. Like, that's the standard. Like, if, like, imagine buying a car, no scratches. It's like, yeah, I fucking hope not. Anyways, this is the issue. I can't watch this movie because I'm not going to pay I'm not going to pay a theater admission ticket price to see something in DVD quality. Thank you very much. And again, I'll pay $5 for it, but it's not in the rotation, so that's where we're at. But I know with Challengers, it'll come to Amazon Prime eventually. So I'm not going to see it in theaters, although it would make a really great date movie. Like, if I were dating somebody right now, which is very hard to do because it would involve me leaving the house, I would go on a date to see this movie. Or I could just, get better Tinder pictures. But that would also involve going out and taking pictures of myself, or taking pictures of myself with people. Which, by the way, when I hang out with somebody, and this is just a guy thing overall, I don't really like taking pictures. I don't like pausing the moment and say, let's get a picture, you know? And I think about this with celebrities. Like, if I were to meet Spielberg, I'd do the same thing of when I met Alexander Payne, where it's like, oh, let me get some wisdom of this, like, filmmaker and talk to him and have a conversation, because my takeaway from this is going to be a story that I tell at a party. So, I got a photo with Ethan Hawke. That's not a story. Oh, me and Ethan Hawke chatted about life, and he told me about what he was going through, and I said what I was going through. That's way more valuable than a picture that gets likes, which you can't take with you. And by that, I don't mean like, oh, riches and blah, 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 blah. Like, think about it. Social media followers and following. When you post something on social media, and I say, because I'm guilty of it, I'm kind of like, well, eventually I'll get social media famous or something like that in my brand and blah, 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 blah. But, like, I realized this week I talked to my former manager at Staples, who has 10 times the followers of me on TikTok. And so 10,000 followers. Well, actually, so four times, because I have 2,500 followers. And I talked to her. I'm like, do you get anything? Like, do you get any money from what you, like, the content that you make? And she's like, no. And I'm like, you have a wish list on there. Has anybody ever bought you anything? No. And I'm just like, okay. So I get to 10,000 followers. You get the opportunity to sell stuff at a store, but is anybody going to buy it? And the answer is kind of no, unless you're setting up something. Like, my cousin has 20,000 dedicated Instagram followers, and she has a business that she does, and she makes a lot from that business. So she's very savvy about that kind of stuff. And me, I have, like, nothing to sell. Unless I want to put up a paywall for my own writing, which I don't want to do, because I'm used to reading things for free, so I wouldn't pay somebody to do it for free. And then that might lead to a circle and stuff like that, but that's where we're at, where we're just kind of trapped in this endless cycle of free that's provided to us by these billionaire companies that, like, just need our attention, essentially, for advertising dollars. And we're like fish swimming at the bottom of the bowl, never to go up and see the light. So, does Amazon really care if I go and see Challengers in theaters or Amazon Prime? The answer is no. And they would probably care more that I watch it on Amazon Prime, because then they could easily point me in the direction of their shopping channel. So number 2 is Lionsgate film, Unsung Hero, Christian movie. What is this selling? God. Belief in God. It's selling us that, if you believe in God and you have faith, good things will happen. I read the plot description earlier. It already exited my mind. This movie, impressively, as Lionsgate does, I did see a single commercial for it, but they played to these niches. And so this movie got the church going groups out. It's a Christian film, and it made $7 million, which is, you know, I've gone on before about per theater average and how $5,000 for a wide release movie is pretty good. This movie made 2,000, but at the end of the day, what matters most is, does the movie make more than you spend? Okay, like it doesn't matter if you have a crappy per theater average. If you get like 2,000 theaters but are out in you know, 10, if you're out in 4,000 theaters and you make $2,000 a theater, that's still a lot of money. Like $8 million maybe. I don't know. I can't do the math. I failed math. But this movie, Unsung Hero, uh, it's part of a production company by people who make religious movies. It cost 6 million. It made 7 million this weekend. So it made its budget back in a weekend. That is a hit. By the standards, if you've heard me talk about the box office on here before, a hit is when you cover your budget opening weekend. That's what you should do. That's like responsible budgeting. So as soon as I find out like what a half decent movie makes opening weekend on like Amazon Prime, I know how much to ask for to make my own movie. So if you guys can find that out, if you're like a producer who's made money on a movie opening weekend, let me know how much that movie made in total, and then I will make a movie for that amount of money, because I'm confident if I do the average that I can succeed, because people don't tout the average enough. The end game of this movie is to get more people to convert. Are they getting more people to convert, or are they just preaching to the choir? Probably the latter, but it's a business, so merry we roll along. Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. This is in its fifth weekend by Warner Brothers. The first movie was a hit. It was the first movie back in 2021 after the pandemic, and not a lot of people went to see it in theaters. So this movie ended up opening in like the 80 million zone, and now it's made about 520 million. It's by Warner Brothers, so Kong being a Universal picture, what does it have to sell you? Well, it's part of a MonsterVerse and stuff. So Warner Brothers is like pro entertainment. They're primarily an entertainment company. They are owned by Warner Brothers and Discovery Channel, so they are the biggest pure entertainment play. There are bigger studios like Disney, but their main business is actually parks and merchandise, which is weird to think about. And then not weird when you realize all of their movies are crappy. Like, I saw the trailer for Mufasa, which came out today, directed by the Academy Award winner behind Moonlight, Barry Jenkins, and I thought, wow, this looks almost like a movie. And I was impressed because there are some images in that. The previous Lion King live action, directed by Jon Favreau, I got like 30 seconds into and was immediately, I don't want to see this, because A, I think The Lion King is overrated. It wasn't even my favorite as a child. And B, this is a quote unquote live action of remake that is completely CGI, so it's actually animated, so it's false advertising. But be amazed when the merchandising company who sells you Disneyland rides comes close to making an actual film, is how you know we're kind of close to the end of whatever era of capitalism we're in. I know people say late capitalism, which is such a stupid term because we don't know how late capitalism is before it collapses. We don't. You can't say that until looking back on history, and we have another depression. Which, by the way, we've had a recession. We're not. We haven't had a second Great Depression, which honestly we kind of need to have as a society, because we need to, just some of the stupid content that rich people are making where they just invest purely in hypothetical growth needs to be canceled, because people used to build things, like I'm sure you can find, a counter example to what I said, but somebody used this metaphor on TikTok where they were like, John D. Rockefeller owned the railroads and had investment and realized the importance of community living and building to ensure his well-being. He had to make sure that the people who essentially bought from him or were his customers, or the world in which he lived in, he needed to make a better place. And that involved investing in growth. If you look back on the billionaires of today, like, yeah, Amazon makes the world a better place in, making anything convenient 24/7. Facebook used to connect us, now it divides us. That is antithetical to, you know, what the world has done. Like, Facebook has been a net negative for my life. Although it was like kind of cool to, have that tool in Facebook in high school, it like, today, like, is it worth the negative conversations we have? Would we even be having conversations without it? I don't know. I use Facebook really passively now. But a number four at the box office is Civil War. And this is a movie by A24 that, to me, is one of the few movies, aside from Challengers on here, that people will be talking about for years to come. Full speed. I have not seen Challengers, but if you take a look at the rest of the movies on this list, and I'll skip past them because the grosses for this week don't matter. We have Abigail making 5 million, Ministry of Gentlemanly Warfare making 3 million, Kung Fu Panda 3.5 million, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire 3.2 million, Dune Part 2 2 million, Boy Kills World 1.6 million. None of these numbers really even matter. And even years from now, they won't matter to the distributors that release them. Because a great many of these feed into existing franchises, and that's where the bottom line is. There's very little direct filmmaking where it's like, I am selling you on the movie, you know. Every one of these has like a side gambit. Now I fully believe that like the people behind Challengers, Luca Guadagnino, like wanted to make like a movie, and he loves film, and that's what he does, and that's why he wants to do it. Zendaya, like, she could have made a perfume commercial. She could have made, another movie of some kind. But this movie is sort of important to her, being her first lead role. She did the Spider-Man movies and Dune movies like as a supporting role. So that's why she's doing it. But it feels mostly like out of a love of film, of like, this is what I do. And Civil War is the same. Abigail, it's like another vampire movie. I'm sure the directors had fun. It looks like a movie I'll watch for free. Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. This is what Guy Ritchie does. He makes Guy films. Henry Cavill is in it. It's just standard men on the mission, shoot it up. Of course, I'll watch it. I like those movies, but like Argyle, which was the last in that vein, was like terrible. Similar British people made this, but Guy Ritchie has sort of gotten better since he made that mediocre Aladdin movie. So Kung Fu Panda 4. This is another Kung Fu Panda movie that they decided that they could have made, so they did. And my nephew saw it in theaters, and he didn't like it that much. Now, granted, he has seen the first one so many times, to the point where he didn't even want to watch the second one. But as he got older, I finally dragged him to watch the second one because I wanted to see the second one. I think the first one is kind of overrated. The second one is good. And the third one is surprisingly good, although like more so thematically than in execution. It makes a good trilogy. This fourth one is like an also ran. So yeah, I'll watch it eventually. But am I looking forward to it? Not really. The series peaked with 3, and they won't do a better one. Even I remember the Dragon Warrior came out for Netflix and that's where this one will go, by the way, to Netflix. This one will. They had a Dragon Warrior TV show, and I watched a few episodes with Aiden, and I can't even remember where we ended off. It was like okay, but like, man, now that you can binge watch TV shows, the kids' TV shows, after a few episodes, it gets rough. Like the monotony of it when there are no commercials, like it's like coming up for air. If you go back and you watch, thankfully my family still has cable. If you watch a kids show and there's the commercial breaks, it's like, like I watch half of this stuff asleep on the couch while he watches, because I get up. These kids, they get up early in the morning, and you watch with them, and it's like, now that there aren't any commercials, there's no like fun toys that remind you that you can go outside and play with your friends. So when you see that, you're like, oh my gosh, like I thought I was in the void here. So the takeaway, I guess, is that commercials need to come back, I guess. And so, because if they come back, then the movies can stop being the commercials themselves, like Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Um, my nephew told me that we watched Ghostbusters together. It's an adult comedy. Okay. They haven't made any kids shows like recently of the Ghostbusters. Um, Although I watched a few of them, I must have seen a few episodes back then. I, I didn't even use the preview channel um, to watch those shows. It was just like, oh, is it on? Of the 72 channels that we get. Oh, okay, this is on every week. Oh, this is a repeat. Oh, well, I guess I'll watch the repeat, I guess. You know, now every episode is a new episode because you can check and see, and it's organized in a way. So, bring back the chaos. Um, yeah, Dune Part 2. Wow, 279 million. Overall, it's made 700 million. Wow, that's a lot of money. Who does that benefit? David Zaslav, who paid himself $50 million, even though he's an a-hole who doesn't have anything to do with the movies he's making. He's a CEO from the Discovery Channel who, somehow conned his way into affording the Discovery Channel to buy Warner Brothers, even though they are the 10th of the size. He was already the highest paid CEO, and now he's an egregiously paid CEO, more so because he structured the stock payout of how he gets paid in a different way so that even if a movie loses money, they can somehow take it as a tax write-off. They have a movie called Coyote versus Acme, which is a live-action, Looney Tunes movie. And they won't release it because they paid $80 million on it. So they are basically going to delete it from their servers when it is a perfectly made movie. I wouldn't say perfect, but it's like a well-made movie. Keep in mind, this is the studio that released Tom and Jerry, the movie, a few years ago, and that movie was terrible. But, my mom still watched it. It looked okay. People aren't picky. This movie made 136 million worldwide. You're telling me that Coyote versus Acme in a post-pandemic world can't make that much money? Tom and Jerry came out 11 months from when the pandemic started. But David Zaslav, who's in charge, sees well, if we don't release this movie, we can delete it and then technically take it as a tax write-off. So all the people who worked on it won't get paid residuals, for years to come. We're just can you imagine putting a movie together and then it getting deleted? When it's done? Oh my gosh, the digital age is scary. Okay, I got to move on from this. Okay, let me talk about something else. Let me talk about Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, because I've spent enough time on the box office. I spent 30 minutes on it. It's enough. Okay. I'm scrolling down my Twitter feed and I see Joe Rogan tweet, and he says, "Guys, I had to say something because there were far too many conspiracy theories about this. No, the Google algorithm isn't against me. Jamie published the episode at midnight and it was 12 hours early and we messed up the time, so I privatized the video and then it came out and just set it to public at noon the day that it was supposed to came out." And that's what happened. But when you do that, it's still it got published at midnight. It was just only viewable to you. So what happens when it's made public is it comes out at noon and then it says it's been out for 12 hours. And for those of you who don't know, if you upload a YouTube video, the moment that it hits the waves of the World Wide Web that we surf is when it can make the biggest splash. So little content creators like me see that and go, "Oh man, he's lost a lot of time here. It's been out for 18 hours when it's really only 6. And it's only made 18,000 views or 180,000 views or 400,000, however many. Joe Rogan is the most popular podcast in the world, okay? He's the Howard Stern of his generation. If he goes and releases something, he got paid, this guy, few years ago $250 million by Spotify to own his podcast, and he convinced them to continue to release clips on YouTube as well, because that's where most of his audience is. And basically, every single person, if you go and watch that episode, and maybe it's different now, but every single comment was like, the evil algorithm is against Joe Rogan. Sorry for coughing. The evil algorithm is against Joe Rogan because he's having Tucker Carlson on his podcast. You know, Google is against, Joe Rogan. There's a saying or a term called Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice what can be adequately explained by stupidity. A stupid mistake. They publicized it too early, hit publish, privatized it, and then did it. That was the reason. There's no conspiracy. It was just a mistake. But we're in such a hyper-reactionary world that people want to, attribute everything to malice. Like, I had a conversation with somebody, and I was really annoyed at it because, let me tell you, I talked about how terrible the Marvel's movies was. I watched 32 previous Marvel movies, and the 33rd one or the 34th one, the Marvel sucked, and it sucked so bad, $100 million, and it's garbage. They should be punished. And so this one guy was posting on Twitter, and of course, somebody said something wrong on the internet. I have to prove it differently. He's like, I don't get why this movie bombed. People should really appreciate this. Meanwhile, keep in mind the movie is garbage. And this guy is talking specifically about the comic book character Monica Rambeau, who has a whole history in the comic books and stuff. But the movie takes your knowledge of that for granted. I did not read, although I read the Miss Marvel comic book as a part of comic book literature, actually, in university. I did not read Monica Rambeau's history and stuff like that. The movie takes for granted that you have seen WandaVision, which, by the way, I watched the first episode of WandaVision, and I'm like, F this is a waste of my time. And so I didn't watch WandaVision, although I've seen all the previous movies. This one doubles down that you have seen, like, all of the Marvel, that you've seen Miss Marvel, which I did watch, even though it was terrible, that you've seen Captain Marvel, which I did watch, even though it's just okay, and WandaVision, which is terrible. It presupposes that you've seen all of that. And this guy was like, I thought this character was interesting. This weird thing that people post now of like, we owe these corporations something rather than the other way around. Like, oh, they did her dirty. It's like, I did her dirty by not paying to see a shitty movie. And I'm like, F this movie. F whoever made it. It's a terrible movie. They should have lost more money on it. And then, of course, he goes, whoa, gee, like, race card, like, oh, you're criticizing something that stars a minority, therefore racism, It's just this big-brained Neanderthal thought process of, like, oh, I don't like something that's less than good, so therefore there must be something wrong with me. Like, what kind of backwards logic are we living in? Let me tell you, Twitter has become some kind of backwoods hillbilly crap. So that person's first thought when I criticized something wasn't that they might be right, which granted, I didn't explain it in the best way I possibly could have. I explained it to you basically how I did on there, although who knows, maybe I use more swear words. So I'm pretty sure I use the F word. So anyways, people attribute to malice what can be explained by as like, this sucked because people didn't try and it's stupid. And the episode in question was a Tucker Carlson episode. And what happens is Tucker Carlson talks about UFOs, standard conspiracy subject matter. And he talks about them with Joe Rogan. Now, Joe Rogan is perfect for this discussion. Tucker Carlson is not. And the way Tucker Carlson fits himself into this conversation is that he legitimizes himself by connecting to a mutual friend of theirs who is a researcher with a PhD. And he says this about the 14 to 18-minute mark of that episode. So go to the 14-minute mark and watch for the next 5 minutes. And Tucker Carlson, in this fascinating way, which a lot of phonies will, if you've ever met somebody in real life, they will have this conversation where it's like, I'm not suited to the thing that I am talking to, but let me legitimize myself by talking about somebody you know. And he brings him up as like, oh, you know this guy? And it's like, Joe Rogan knows him. We know Joe Rogan knows him. I don't even watch the podcast, and I know he knows him. Tucker Carlson has met him once in this conversation that he is saying, and probably talked to him for like a minute. And he's like, well, he said this. And Joe Rogan is like, yeah. And they're talking about UFOs. And it's just super annoying because not 5 months ago, Tucker Carlson on Christmas Day on Twitter was, and he also posted it to Kevin Spacey's YouTube page, was interviewing not Kevin Spacey, but Frank Underwood, the character from House of Cards. Because Kevin Spacey, ever since he's been canceled, every other Christmas he's come out with Let Me Be Frank video, which the first one was entertaining, second one less so, third one he kind of dropped the character, and then this most recent one he's kind of back in it. And it's kind of a fascinatingly creepy Christmas video because it's so fantastically well acted, the first one. But here is this guy who is interviewing somebody who we can all presume, based on what little whisperings we've heard from Hollywood, is pretty untoward towards minors and some of the co-stars that he's worked with. He said inappropriate things. He's done inappropriate things. Basically, been a real-life Kevin Spacey character. And further, the people in the past who have testified against him at trials, two of them have died under mysterious circumstances. One was an apparent suicide, and I think the other person is missing. And these are the people who testified against Kevin Spacey at a sexual assault trial. And that's not the Anthony Rapp one, which I do not believe actually went to trial. But it nonetheless was the one that came out in the middle of the Me Too movement, or the height of it, which is October 2017. I just remember that vividly because that was like every week, man. Somebody was getting canceled. It was a very entertaining time for an innocent person. Not so much Hollywood. So, Tucker Carlson, who probably has his own thoughts about Kevin Spacey's guilt. And I will say it is just because from the ways I've told stories, John Bernthal, who hosts The Real Ones, that's another podcast, spoke about working with Kevin Spacey on Baby Driver, and he's like, had I seen some of the things that, like, he was saying to some of the men working on that movie, like the crew and stuff, I would have, if he were saying those things to a woman, I would have said something. Which is just, John Bernthal is a bit old-fashioned about that kind of stuff. And that's probably why Kevin Spacey has lasted as long as he did. And he's also, like, let's be real, a fantastic actor. But in this world, the reason he's been canceled is because people don't trust him. Like, he's not safe. He's unsafe. So for, anybody who is supposed to have observational skills, i.e. anybody who's been successful in media, somebody like Tucker Carlson would know that. To then go and do business with this guy is kind of low-level disgusting. So my takeaway is that I find Tucker Carlson pretty illegitimate, which is fine because, they're talking about UFOs here. But it's annoying to me to see this guy interview a literal television character 5 months ago, and then 5 months later he's going to come on and with a straight face and tell us the truth of, like, the UFOs, like he's uncovered something grand. It's like, this guy was too extreme for Fox News, meaning that he went on Fox News, he had his own show, and he lied about voting machines, and he lied and he lied and he lied, and it got to the point where the voting machine company who he was lying about said, yeah, uh, they're lying. There's no truth to this. Stop talking about it. And Fox News told Tucker Carlson, stop lying. Uh, we're going to get sued on this. And Tucker Carlson just couldn't let it go. He kept doing it. And what ended up happening, because he has control of his own show, and he was bringing in ratings for them. But what he was doing to bring in those ratings was saying just incendiary things. Um, Sorry if I can't pronounce that right. It's not a word I've heard in real life enough. I'm not part of the army. Anyway, he's been saying this stuff, and Fox is like, "We're gonna get sued," and then they get sued, and then they realize that all their problems go away if they just, even if they have to give him a golden parachute, which is fire him and honor his contract and pay him out, even if there's like several years left, uh, it will save them money than what they will have to do in that. So they get sued for lying about the voting machines. Fox News does in an $800 million deal that they can then use as a tax write off. And they realize all their problems go away if they get rid of Tucker Carlson, which, why wouldn't they? The guy's been lying about them, and it's like they brought them the ratings that they wanted, but, this is the contingency. And so, even for Fox News, they get caught in a lie and they have to pay up. So they cut him loose. And, I find if Tucker Carlson was telling the truth, he would have stayed. Like, the company would have looked at him and said, "This guy is an asset." Okay, like he's bringing in more money than he's worth, and even if he wasn't, it's like he's giving us Peabodys, he's giving us awards and stuff. All Tucker Carlson had to bring in to Fox News was money. And then it got to the point where he alienated the advertisers and then alienated the people who he was working on, where they're like, "You're making it so easy for us to sue you." So they cut him loose. And now he's illegitimate. And he was like, "Okay, well, if I'm illegitimate, I might as well interview a television character." So he interviews Kevin Spacey, and it's just, the idea of it is kind of like, I can't believe this. It's disturbing. And Kevin Spacey, who's been in the theater and Hollywood for a long time, of course he knows secrets and stuff. But the big, like, does Kevin Spacey know like a bigger secret than that, like, he's a pedophile? Like, people talk about the biggest secret in Hollywood is that it's full of pedophiles. Like, is does Kevin Spacey know of a bigger pedophile that he is not connected to? Like, he is known to be on the Epstein plane, on the Epstein list. And what's funny to me is that him and Bill Clinton and Chris Tucker and a few others. You can actually see the flight logs. He is on that list and has gone to that island several times. So if anybody's the pedophile, it's him. So yeah, I find that really funny that, like, people talk about legitimacy and exposure of the truth in Hollywood, and it's like, well, the biggest culprit is the one who's quote unquote trying to expose it. So yeah, I find it funny that, like, in this desperate hunt for the truth, many users of this show, many of whom watch it for laughs, are like, first thought, there's a conspiracy, and Google is out to get, Joe Rogan and talk obscene amounts of money. Yeah, no. Never attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity. Um, so, there's a simple reason for it all. I didn't watch the rest of it because it's like, okay, what truth are they going to get to in this episode, okay? Like, the episodes of Joe Rogan that I've watched are usually ones where there's a comedian or an actor where they can talk about their life and I'm interested in their craft. Mel Gibson went on there with his dad, and I'm like, sweet. They're gonna talk about the underbelly of Hollywood and stuff. And then he just, like, they talk about prescription drugs or non-prescription drugs this whole time and they don't talk about movies. You have a movie star on, like that annoyed me. And then, comedians are always funny because they constantly crack jokes. We've all seen, what's the one we've seen most? Oh, the Bill Burr episode. And then what's the other ones? Oh, Jordan Peterson when he was at the height, when he was still working at University of Toronto. So he was like kind of when he was still a psychologist. That was interesting because he like was part of a moment like connected to culture. Now he's just like a bookseller. So, you know, that's irrelevant. So, yeah, I like watching Joe Rogan when somebody brings something to the table. Tucker Carlson brings nothing to the table. If he had spoken about not UFOs and it's like, I was fired, here's why, and had some kind of interesting spin on it, there's enough there where you could grain some truth out of this. But, obviously Joe Rogan isn't going to push back on that, and I don't blame him. But I would love for Joe Rogan to have like Joe Biden on there, just really, I wouldn't say give him the gears, but kind of test him a bit because uh, I blame basically the left for radicalizing Joe Rogan basically because he said that like he wasn't going to be political or something. Um, he wasn't sure if he was going to vote for Biden, and this was during the primaries with Bernie and stuff like that, or after Bernie had lost. Um, and of course, the left was threatened by that because he speaks to a lot of people. And then people started digging in way too quickly, by the way, like Joe Rogan, anti trans this and anti trans that. And the problem with that is that that works for somebody like J.K. Rowling, who's like an author and has no place in like the sporting world. But when you have somebody like Joe Rogan, who I wouldn't consider necessarily an authority in the sporting world, he's a commentator, but he has a place. So attacking somebody from their base of legitimacy is a mistake unless you're gonna like take them to court, because you got to bring your homework with that. And it was just like basically a hastily assembled hack attack from like the Hillary Clinton group of the Democratic campaign who are like weak, need losers. And what happened was that drove Joe Rogan more to the right, and now he doesn't get a whole lot of celebrities on the Joe Rogan experience because he's basically become a bit of a pariah. So yeah, it's very very annoying to me because I like it. You see right now. I mentioned him earlier being the Howard Stern of his generation. Howard Stern gets people on there. Like, you have Alec Baldwin talking about working with Tom Cruise. That's something. You have like a serial killer calling into the show to, talk to Howard Stern. Howard Stern's trying to find out who he is. And it's like, okay, who are the biggest people that Joe Rogan has on? Elon Musk, yeah, richest man in the world, but like rich in terms of like stock value, like a businessman. Okay, he operates multiple tech companies. He's not out in the world. He's like kind of behind the scenes doing his own thing. Edward Snowden, leaker. Okay, cool. A couple other people I don't know. So you go down and you're like, okay, it's the conversation. Like another person that they had was Russell Brand, of course, on the show, and Russell Brand is very entertaining for like the first 2 hours that you hear about him, and then you realize that it's like not a lot going on. Leah Remini, ex Scientologist, there's something. Kanye West says crazy shit all the time. There's something. Even Ben Shapiro, who's like, a beady-eyed kind of idiot, or and then you have Joey Diaz, who's like funny. It's like all of these, the best people. Post Malone is another one, kind of edgy. All of these people, Robert Downey Jr. even, they all add something to Mike Tyson. They all add something to the culture, and Joe Rogan carries the rest. Tucker Carlson just doesn't add that value for me. He he's a liar. He was exposed for being a liar. He got fired, and now there's that. I guess somebody who I'd be interested in seeing on, I guess next, is Don Lemon, who I don't think can say a lot of stuff. For those of you who don't know, he was a CNN anchor. I didn't like. He got a bit too big for his britches. and there was a power struggle in at CNN again because of the industry shakeup. It gets bought. CNN gets a new owner, gets a new guy. New guy comes in, doesn't get along with the new guy. There's a power struggle. New guy is unpopular. Fires one of Don Lemon's friends, Chris Cuomo, who honestly would have been fired anyway. But Don Lemon gets mad, upsets Don Lemon. Don Lemon and this guy don't get along. Guy boots him to the morning news, where he doesn't do well. And then he makes a comment about a woman being past her prime, which, oh my God, like, for a professional reporter to like make that mistake, he thought he ate, basically, um, and he didn't. It came back on him, uh, and and he got fired. And then he was like, "Oh, okay." And Elon Musk is like, "Oh, I love free media, um, free, you know, free places. Let me be a Twitter show. We can balance. You'll be on the left." So Don Lemon basically goes to work for Twitter, and then he interviews Elon Musk. Elon Musk isn't used to being interviewed by an actual anchor who asks tough questions. And Elon Musk, to his credit, is like, yeah, I don't like being asked real questions. I'm just not going to air this interview, and you're not going to have a job anymore. So now he's like a free agent. And yeah, so it's, a lot of, yeah, his comment was about Nikki Haley being past her prime, which Nikki Haley is an a-hole. She's 51, and she's not in doing a beauty contest, so, like, what does that mean, being in her prime? Like, she's running as a presidential candidate, which that was during that time. She's since dropped out. But yeah, I just kind of find that funny. Which, by the way, does anybody want to take bets on Nikki Haley being Donald Trump's vice president? Because she is the runner-up. If you want to win and support the base, you just basically pick the runner-up of the contest of your party's run to be president. So, like, in the primaries, Donald Trump ran. Nikki Haley came second. What's the guy? Governor Ron DeSantis from Florida came third. So, like, basically, he's completely burned the bridge with Mike Pence. And Mike Pence in the polls is kind of useless. So, Donald Trump has to pick somebody else for their ticket, even if he doesn't win. Um, so yeah, if I were him, I'd pick somebody flashy and interesting that I want to pick. So, like, a celebrity, but good luck like, he's a bit radioactive, you see, because he's going through one of 4 criminal trials right now, which I would easily find him guilty on all 4. It's funny to me because the Attorney General of New York um, basically is the one who brought the charges against him. And people are like, oh, it's bad to bring this case against him now. And I'm kind of like, if not now, when? Because if he's going to be president a second time, he's going to screw things up. Like, what good is it to bring your first charges against him while he's in office? It's going to be impossible to prosecute a sitting president. Like, forget it. And then that holds up a lot of stuff. So, yeah, my basic take on all of this is, like, covers of legitimacy. People, we need people who say things that are legitimate, that can be proven, and we need people to say things that, like, have an impact on our culture and get people to think and talk to each other. And if you can't do that, then be entertaining, but be forewarned, if you're not in the entertaining business and you try and be entertaining and you stop being entertaining, you're done. So, get your practice, get your ducks in order. Man, I was so ready to now, not because I said anything significant, but because I didn't. And it's a new thing. I'm getting used to it. What can I say? But yeah, just kind of thinking about stuff. So I am gonna finish this list that I've been working on for quite a while, and that is the top 10 best picture winners of all time. These are my top 10. At number 10 is a movie that on this list I have actually seen the most of, and that is Lord of the Rings Return of the King. I saw this in theaters when I was a boy. Um, when I saw the first one, remember they came out essentially within 2 years of each other. They were all filmed back to back. And I don't think a trilogy like this will be done again. People have done two movies back to back since. Doing three is kind of insane. Um, and the director at New Line Cinema, like the head of the company, um, bet the future of the company on like $180 million on these movies being out, being a success, and being good. It's an insane bet to bet an entire movie studio on the outcome of a movie. But the fact that this movie won 11 Oscars, Return of the King, um, is crazy. I saw it in theaters, and I remember about it, just basically it having essentially four endings and having to go to the bathroom and being like, oh, it's okay, it's going to end. And there was another one, and then there was another one. I have never had to hold in my pee more than I did in that movie. Like, holy moly. Um, and the funniest thing was that I remember walking out of that movie and this guy with his son saying, and there was a few pages left for Samwise Gamgee. Maybe we'll see another one. And I'm like, oh, this guy doesn't know. It's based on a series of books. They're done. And little did I know that they would grind three movies out of one Hobbit book and then make a terrible TV series that is just god awful that I struggled through. That's getting another season because it's contractually obligated to, regardless of what amount of money it made. They made that cost 250 million, that TV series, and it's so bad. Amazing, like for the first episode at least, it has a amazing production value. Like they got that right. But there's no story. And the people who were involved with it, like they don't like the lore of Lord of the Rings is not something that you can mess with. Like you really need scholars. And the people that they hired to make this show um, are not great writers. So that's the issue. Peter Jackson was, and rewatching it, especially in the wake of Game of Thrones, like it's you really appreciate it. It kind of feels like a dry run for what Game of the Thrones achieved at its height, but I found Return of the King the most satisfying. Um, doesn't need to be 3 hours and 20 minutes or 4 hours extended. No, um, but I'd like to see the third uh, one theatrical again, which is what I think I will do next time I watch it. So I saw it in theaters, enjoyed it for what it was at the time, appreciated it more as I got older. And then one summer with my sister, we watched all three movies, like essentially back to back. And then I watched it again during the pandemic, like just 2 summers ago. And it was funny because we watched like half of the movie each night, is how we did it. Like, so we watched like 90-minute episodes, 90 minutes, 90 minutes. Because the first one is like 2 hours and 58 minutes. And the second one is like 2:59. The third one's 3 hour 20. But if you do the extended, which we did, it's like 3 hours and 20 minutes. Um, and then if they had 30 minutes to the next, then it's 3 hours and 30 minutes, and then 4 hours. And let me tell you, the first half of the Two Towers is a pain. But the third one on rewatch, I think I liked most, just because it's all payoff. So like as an epic fight, but it doesn't. It's kind of a repeat of the fight in the second one, but it's where they finally put the ring in the pit. So I really appreciate the lore. The first one, The Fellowship of the Ring, is actually, I would say, the best because it has a strong emotional arc. But yeah, Lord of the Rings is great. At number 9, now, when I was originally putting together this list, I was putting together a list of the best picture movies. This was, we always have this conversation when ranking movies of like, is it the best movie of all time or is it your favorite? Because they're two different things. Personal favorite is like, I like the flaws of this movie better. I enjoy it more, even though it's not as well made. So this would be my number one. If I was going by like my favorite, I'm going by what I think is the best, like objectively, which is foolhardy, I know, because there's no such thing as objectivity in human subjectivity, but bear with me. Number 9 is Crash. People on the internet effing hate this movie, and my brother also hates it. I love it. It was a formative movie for me. I was about 11 when I watched it, and if you watch it now, it holds up because the editing is very good. Everything links together very well. The music is fantastic. It's just basically a set piece machine, but a set piece of human drama where it's like the highest, what would be the finale of every episode of the OC played at the same time. You know, that's like the emotional high point. The acting in it is really good. The characterizations are razor thin. You have a cop whose identity is that he's racist and he's a misogynist and he's probably like he's a groper, sexual assaulter. If he was a rapist, I wouldn't be surprised. And then he, get this, does his job at the climax of the movie, saving a woman under a burning car who was a woman he's previously sexually assaulted. It's kind of like an interesting thing because I talk about in my review of Civil War coming out that the value proposition of something is in many cases that's not done, that you don't see in very many movies, which is probably an appeal of Challengers, is that you don't see many high-end movies that take place today, like that you could go outside and make, like unless they're an action movie, there's big explosions, or they're like a domestic drama about like family issues. And then other than that, you see westerns, you see sci-fi futures, alien invasions, TV gets into that more. But something like Crash is like, here's a basic like skit, and then here's somebody acting. And in it, you have Michael Pena acting his butt off. You have Yinsen, Sean Tube, or Tobe. Sorry, Sean, for not pronouncing your name correctly. It's Taub. So Sean Tobe. Both of them were in the Marvel Universe. Michael Pena was Luis, who would do the recaps in the Ant-Man movies, but he has an amazing scene. Terrence Howard is intense. He has a great scene. He has a fighting scene with Tandy Newton. They both act in it very well. You have Brendan Fraser yelling at, his wife, played by Sandra Bullock, who's yelling at him. Of course, Brendan Fraser in this role he's like the calm, level-headed district attorney. And Sandra Bullock is his like racist suburban housewife. And so, she's yelling that, she wants Michael Pena to, who just changed the locks in their home after they were carjacked by Ludacris, to change the locks. But because Michael Pena is Mexican, that she wants the locks changed again. And it's like, that's her characterization. That's the character that she's played there. And that ends with her slipping on the stairs and spraying her ankle. Jeez. And, like, she realizes that her housewife is a person. Wow. But, like, then you have, like, dramatic, what I like about it is its use of gun violence. I like a lot. An example of its weak writing is you basically have a racist cop in training played by Ryan Phillippe who tries to be a hero, but then pulls a gun and, spoiler alert, kills a guy. And that's supposed to be a lesson in him that, like, you think yourself, you have no idea. Which is what the racist, misogynistic, rapist cop says to him earlier. Really ugly stuff. Um, People like to joke that when Jack Nicholson read Best Picture that year, which people often consider Crash to be the worst Best Picture winner ever, which I don't. Even though, hey, guess who distributed it? Lionsgate, who, as I've said many times on this podcast, is really cheap. Um, that movie, by the way, opened almost 20 years ago. Um, it was actually made 20 years ago. Um, in 2004 and released and did like a week in LA or played at a film festival. It might have been Toronto International Film Festival, but didn't officially release until May 2005. And it was only out in 1,000 or so theaters, but it made about 50 million. It was a really healthy marketplace at the time. And the thing about this movie is that it stars Brendan Fraser, Tandy Newton. Brendan Fraser, by the way, has since won an Oscar. Sandra Bullock, who has since won an Oscar. Terrence Howard, who later received an Academy Award nomination and got canceled. Probably for good reason, who knows? He's great in Hustle and Flow, though. William Fichtner, character actor from Heat, who's, I love seeing that guy. I mentioned Michael Pena, who's, a good actor. It has it has the highest emotional highs of any movie that is like about we are all connected. And it's like in the most shallow way possible. But like what I'm amazed at is that like the connections in Robert Altman's Shortcuts, which came way, 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 way earlier. And even that's a redo of his movie from 1975, which was nominated for Best Director, called Nashville. And it's about the music scene in Nashville. And that is also like multiple people, ensemble picture, multiple plots, interconnected, that kind of thing. All of those are like movies about vague connections. Even other movies which came later on. So you had the two Altman movies, Nashville, nominated for Best Picture. That was the Jaws year. You have what else? I'm trying to think. Barry Lyndon, Jaws. So it's a really good year. Long story short, that was kind of the first movie to do that, and it also did overlapping dialogue and plots and stuff like that. And if you watch it, it's a good movie that like holds up about like in Nashville, music holds us together, and it in turn holds together America. And it's like a small plotted movie, uh, and every single character, like because Robert Altman was so real, he had everybody create their own music. And one of the actors who like they weren't a musician, but they like made their own. It was like Lily Tomlin or David Carradine or one of the Carradines or something, and they made it might have been Keith, and they made like a hit song just like on their own because it was like their job as an actor. And they're like, can you imagine just like I'm in training for a role and you do something like just so small and it ends up becoming a hit? I just kind of find that funny. Or, maybe it wasn't a hit. Maybe it's revisionist history and people who like the movie are just telling me that. But that was the first of its kind to use multiple ensemble things. So Nashville, it's like a historical movie of historical importance. Um, I watched it during the pandemic. It was fine. And so Robert Altman did that movie, and then he had a couple of other hits that I won't get into. But he then did this movie called The Player in 1992, which was sort of his comeback movie about the industry of filmmaking. But it's like very 90s, but they have so many people in that movie. And, in that movie, it's about Tim Robbins, who basically a studio executive who kills a screenwriter and tries to cover it up, and it comes back to haunt him in like a funny way. It's like a dark comedy. Um, it's so weird how it ends too, in like such a neatly wrapped bow that's like serves as an ironic statement of like how things can come together in Hollywood even though they shouldn't quite work. So he made that. That was a comeback for him. Then he made Shortcuts, which was like kind of a mini resurgent for him, and that was very much like Crash, where multiple people, different plots, except there's a murder somewhere. It's kind of ends in like a super spooky, way with like a Deus Ex Machina of like an earthquake happening that like shows that Surprise, surprise, we're all part of something bigger. Um, yeah, this is based on a novel or characters by Raymond Carver, who's like known in circles as like a playwright or author or something like that. But anyways, that goes along. And then in 1999, because he's so inspired by Robert Altman, who, you know, I think he won an honorary Academy Award, but he was like, you know, known as the best to ever do it. The a big inspiration, somebody that he inspired was Paul Thomas Anderson. Robert Altman nominated for 7 Oscars, and never won one. Um, Meanwhile, the person inspired by him, Paul Thomas Anderson, nominated for 13 Oscars and never won one, which is funny. But yeah, Altman was nominated for directing MASH, the movie. He won an honorary award. I'll get to that. He was nominated for Best Director for Nashville, didn't win. Nominated Best Picture for Nashville, didn't win. Nominated for Best Director for The Player, didn't win. Nominated for Best Director for Shortcuts, didn't win. Nominated for Best Director for Gosford Park, which is basically like a Clue movie, except we're really boring. Didn't win. It comes together nicely from the writer of Downton Abbey. And then nominated for Best Picture for Gosford Park, didn't win. And then they gave him an honorary award in 2006. The last movie, Prairie Home Companion, based on the radio show he makes before he dies. He also stars Lindsay Lohan, Kevin Kline, Tommy Lee Jones, Meryl Streep, Lily Tomlin, and this is just off the top of my head. I can remember them. Anyways, that year he wins the. He's super old at that point, and he wins an honorary Academy Award, which to many people don't count. I think we should count them because now we're just handing out Oscars to people who we feel should maybe win at some time. It's like people decided that Killian Murphy is like a husk, so that apparently, so like we better give him an Oscar now because it's not like he has 40 fucking years to give us a performance that will win. I'm just mad that Paul Giamatti didn't win for the holdovers because I thought he added more to the existing role. As good, Killian Murphy was solid in that movie. He did not scream to me New York Jew who invented the atom bomb. He was still very much to me like 20 years too old, but he got what Christopher Nolan wanted to. He brought what he wanted to that role and whatnot. But anyways, Altman on his last movie, Prairie Home Companion. When you get to a certain age in Hollywood, people will not insure you to direct because they're worried that you are going to die. So you basically need somebody to sit beside you. I kid you not, like that. The company will feel comfortable taking over in the event that you die. This happened with William Friedkin, director of The Exorcist, made a movie called The Kane Mutiny Court Martial. Who did they get as director stand in case this guy croaks? Guillermo del Toro, who he said, all I did was sit next to him on the monitor the whole time and watch him work. So on Robert Altman's last movie was Paul Thomas Anderson. Paul Thomas Anderson is so inspired by Robert Altman in his early career, which is, or early late career, which is post Shortcuts. They makes Magnolia, another ensemble movie about, look at all these famous people in this movie. Aren't we all connected? And it's just funny to me that, like, I watch Magnolia, it's an okay movie, would make a better TV series. It's just about, people in the San Fernando Valley in essentially the movie industry and television industry and all trying to make a living and how where you expect it to come together but it doesn't, and that's the point because bigger things can happen. It's funny when you look at the large ensemble of movies, like if you made another movie like this today, it would get eaten alive because everybody has seen the same movies I've seen. They've seen Shortcuts, they've seen the rest of Altman movies, they've seen Magnolia, and they've seen Crash. And people have tried to recreate Crash, but they couldn't because Crash did it best. The editing, the music, the song In the Deep, there's something spiritual about the movie. The acting is really good, and it was just, to me, made at the right time. And people talk about Roger Ebert liked this movie. He was one of the few people who liked it. A lot of people hate it. Again, it's basically a very simple, think of like a one act play or like a 5 minute skit, like a serious skit that somebody did for high school, and then pick six of those and have them intersperse and then have them take place in the same city and then have all of them involve racism randomly and somewhat needlessly. And that's this movie because it's written and directed by a white guy who doesn't really have a true grasp of racism, but he writes poetically. He wrote the HBO miniseries Show Me a Hero, which I liked, stars Oscar Isaac, and it's just about a housing district in, or he just directed it, I think. It's about Oscar Isaac, who's the mayor of Yonkers, and the housing district, and how difficult it is to get affordable housing made, and the trouble this like small district has. And that's such a David Simon thing to write about, the guy who wrote The Wire. Um, but like it has an emotional punch, and this guy brings to it. So that's why I like Crash, and that's why Crash is a number nine. But Show Me a Hero is uh, is a good series. It has a wonderful extreme close up of Oscar Isaac at the end. Like if you think you've seen an extreme close up before, like it's really hard for a director to get it right in an emotional scene like that. But yeah, I found that Paul Haggis nailed it uh, on that, and it's just it's 6 parts, 2 parts an episode, um, and yeah, I like that. Critical acclaim, even though like viewership was low, 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. Um, yeah, an impressively crafted period drama whose timely themes prove as absorbing as it is engaging, compassionately drawn characters. Kind of the opposite of what people said about Crash. Um, but yeah, nonetheless, I enjoy it. And I think for Show Me a Hero, I think about it anytime I see affordable housing being built because I'm like, oh man, it is tough to like get the community together and get like the government to pay for this thing. And then there's zoning, and then it's like, was it worth it because the people will move in? It's like crime and stuff. Like it's a sensitive social critique. Um, does Crash have that? No, but I just find it a hell of an entertaining movie, and I'll defend it because all I ask of my movies is to be entertaining, and I care about everything else secondary. Number eight, it's kind of funny because wouldn't this be number one? Uh, I might have mentioned it before, but 1988 Best Picture winner, starring Tom Cruise, Dustin Hoffman, Rain Man. Um, this is a movie by MGM. Um, that is like a really good movie. If you haven't seen it, you absolutely should watch it. It's about Tom Cruise realizes that he has a brother. Um, his name's Charlie Babbitt. He has a brother named Raymond. And when his father dies, he realizes he has a brother who's getting everything in the will. So he goes out to meet his brother, and his brother is autistic, played by non-autistic person Dustin Hoffman, who's great in the movie. Tom Cruise, arguably better in playing a harder role. It's one of Tom Cruise's most interesting and best roles, and I say this because most Tom Cruise movies post Jerry Maguire I like, but pre Jerry Maguire he's kind of immature and like a cocky idiot and kind of trying too hard. He hasn't perfected that persona. And Rain Man, directed by Barry Levinson, who is the father of Euphoria creator Sam Levinson, um, uh, is it's just a good movie. Watch it. Um, can I really say much more other than it inspired The Hangover for the card counting scene? It's just a very good road movie, and it was developed as a Steven Spielberg movie with MGM at the time, who I might have mentioned earlier in this podcast. Paul Thomas Anderson directed Licorice Pizza for MGM, and that was their first MGM movie to be nominated for Best Picture since this one won. It swept the awards. It won for screenplay. Dustin Hoffman won Best Actor, even though he's kind of Tom Cruise is the lead of that movie, if you ask me. But yeah, just great, satisfying movie all around. Seven is a movie which also won a lot of Academy Awards. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And this movie, directed by um, Milos Forman, is about a guy who is sane, checks himself into an insane asylum to get out of a jail sentence, and that person played by Jack Nicholson. And so he's like the only sane person in an insane asylum. And yeah, it's just an overall great, well done movie. Great title. And it's about a guy who is sane, and everybody at the insane asylum knows it with the staff and stuff like that. So he clashes basically with these people, and it makes for really great drama. It won 5 Oscars. It is the top rated movie on IMDb, number 18. And it won Best Picture, Best Actor in a Leading Role for Jack Nicholson, Best Actress in a Leading Role for Louise Fletcher, who plays one of the all-time great movie villains. Brad Dourif was nominated for Supporting Actor. He actually plays Grima Wormtongue in the Lord of the Rings series. Um, uh, Milos Forman won Best Director. It won Best Adapted Screenplay. Lawrence Halbin and Bo Goldman. It was nominated for cinematography, editing, and original dramatic score. But for a movie to win Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, and Best Screenplay has only been done like the only other movie to like do that sort of sweep was I'm trying to think, Silence of the Lambs, and I think the third one was um, yeah, Silence of the Lambs, this movie, and I guess Everything Everywhere All at Once. But yeah, it won 5 Oscars, but it won like the big five: picture, director, actor, actress, screenplay. Um, so that's pretty special. By comparison, if I look at Rain Man, um, so in 1998, it won 4 Oscars. So, one less. But it won, I'm guessing, picture, director, actor, screenplay. Yeah, yeah. So that's, it's pretty major. It was also nominated for screenplay by John Seal, who is really good at his job. Um, Hans Zimmer, it was Hans Zimmer's first score, Rain Man. And then art direction and film editing. It is a well edited film, I'll give it that. So number 6 is the first movie Dustin Hoffman won Best Actor for, and that is Kramer versus Kramer. If you've seen Marriage Story, it's like that, but better. Stars Meryl Streep and Dustin Hoffman at the top of their game. Meryl Streep walks up to Dustin Hoffman in their apartment and says, "I want a divorce." And the whole movie is about their divorce, and it has a court case, and basically she leaves and he has to raise a father, become a father, and he hasn't been a father before. He's just basically been a workaholic at his own work, and hasn't been much of a family person, so he has to become a father, and in the process he has to kind of fight against the mother of his child, and learn something about himself. It's just a good movie. Um, you know, uh, the one thing that makes me laugh and people kind of use as like I don't know, a negative, like it is pretty bad. It's Dustin Hoffman was one of the first like taking method acting too far kind of types. So he made uh, like Marathon Man, and he ran up all night because there's a movie where he's supposed to be exhausted, and of course, Laurence Olivier was like, "You should try acting and stuff." But in this, he like fights with her, Meryl Streep and stuff, and he in one take like legitimately slapped Meryl Streep right across the face, which is makes me laugh just because Meryl Streep is like the best actor of all time, full stop. People on TikTok who say she's not haven't seen enough of her movies. So for somebody to be like as high and mighty as her. Like, she's won 3 Oscars. She probably deserves 4. Um, so like for somebody for that high to encounter another actor who's like so bold and would do that, like if it were a less successful actor, I'd feel bad because it's like they're taken advantage of. But this way, it just kind of reads as like, I don't want to say them earning their keep because nobody deserves to be tagged like that. Although, if you're making that kind of subject matter and the movie does turn out to be good and you're both good in it, then I get it. Um, yeah. So that movie, 1979, this was one of like the top 10 highest grossing movies of its year, actually. Um, it made a lot of money. And this is in the late 70s. So imagine in the late 70s, the top, like one of the top movies of the year is a drama about divorce. That's how big this movie was. It's a very good movie. It made 106 million in the 70s. Okay. Like, understand 100 million, like 106 million in 1979. Um, Let me just see here how much that, like, what is that the equivalent to today? So today that is no, because it says a billion. That's not correct. 1, 2, 3, 106, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1979, 456 million. Okay, so what movie recently made 456 million? Because that's more than Dune. Okay, like Dune 2 made, a lot of money. And this is just in North America. So, what can we do if we go back? So, the last movie to make that money. Yeah, okay. Well, that's markedly less than the Super Mario Brothers movie, so that's not like a good example. Because no, that's in year releases. That's correct. Because I was trying to think, okay, why are only some of these coming up? Um, yeah, like, it's significantly more than Oppenheimer. It is still more than Across the Spider Verse. Um, Less than what's something, because I want to get this right. Um, it's basically the same amount as Black Panther, Wakanda Forever made. That still doesn't even feel right because it's like 3D premiums or something like that. Like, I need like an original cultural event to compare this to. Obviously, 2020 isn't going to work. So if I go back to 2019, where there are a lot of movies, um, Frozen 2, that doesn't even, because that's a sequel. I want to find a phenomenon that is comparable to what this movie made. It's important, and like, good luck finding something that's like not a sequel, because you won't find one. Like, this movie made more than one Wonder Woman, when it came out, which again doesn't even, like, that doesn't seem like a whole lot. Um, okay, just give me 1 second here because I'm going back up. We're coming up on 10 years. The last movie that was an equivalent. This was the first movie I thought of. This made as much as Avengers 2. Okay, Kramer versus Kramer, and you watch it and you're like, this is one of the cultural movies. Um, yeah, that's that's all I'll say. Um, that's how big that movie was. So yeah, that's why it's my number 6. I mean, you can tell with my top 8. These are all full stop good movies, no caveats. Um, Number 5 is The Departed. This is the Scorsese movie that I enjoy the most. Um, I find it really fun, really good lines, um, really good um, plotting. Scorsese said it's the only one of my movies with a plot, and watch YouTube clips of it all the time. I saw it in theaters. The shock in the audience in the theater. Spoiler alert. when Leo gets shot was like, oh, like incredible. The room fell silent. Amazing. Um, yeah. What else do we got? We got at number 4, Forrest Gump. This movie I've seen on TV quite a lot. Seen it through about once. Um, it won. See, now I gotta check the Oscars because Kramer versus Kramer, by the way, that movie won 5 Oscars. If it will let me load it. That was what Streep won her Supporting Actress Award for. So it won for picture, uh, actor for Dustin Hoffman, which I said. The kid. Um, Here's a fun fact about the kid in the movie. At age 8 years, 10 months, and 20 days, Justin Henry, is the youngest nominee for any competitive honor in Academy Awards history. Uh, and the kid cried when he didn't win the Academy Award, which is sad. Um, you know, I wonder what he looks like now, because it's so weird that, he looks like a regular guy. Has he been in anything ever since? Not really. He was in the show My Own Worst Enemy, but yeah, most child actors retire. But yeah, um, it won for supporting actress, um, which I mentioned, best screenplay. Uh, it's probably based on a book. Yeah, so screenplay. It was nominated for film editing and cinematography. Um, there were no under the radar, they call them below the line awards, like technical awards, that it won, but it was nominated for film editing. It's a well edited movie, and every time I say well edited movie, what I mean is that it's paced quite it's paced quite well. Like it's a very watchable movie. There are no boring parts. That's essentially what I mean. Um, yeah, yeah. Expect when you watch Kramer versus Kramer, the screenplay to be good. Best director 1980. Like, okay, well, and this is the thing. Like it winning in 1980. Okay, let me just go through here because you might be like, really? For best director. The other nominee is Francis Ford Coppola for Apocalypse Now. He probably should have won for that, like definitely over Robert Benton, because Kramer versus Kramer is like at its heart a domestic drama that kind of anybody could have made. Um, and then we have this guy Edward Molinaro for Le Cage au Follet. Does that translate to anything I would remotely know? Is it the bird cage? Yes, it is the bird cage. Okay, well that makes sense then, because that was remade into a movie with Robin Williams and Nathan Lane, basically, and Gene Hackman, basically about girl marries a boy, has to tell her family, or he has to tell his family. Her family wants to meet his family. The thing is, he was raised by two gay dads at a time when, keep in mind this was in the late 70s, and then in the 90s it was done in its own way. So now, it's just less of a big deal. But like back then, the Birdcage, it's a comedy. Yeah. And then you have Bob Fosse for all that jazz. A well regarded movie that we have here. And then Peter Yates Breaking Away. So it was kind of like they did not want to give it to Francis Ford Coppola again, considering he did The Godfather. So, yeah, I just found that pretty funny. And then when we work back to The Departed, because I know for that one, for definitely won for Best Director, would have won Best Picture. I know it won Best Adapted Screenplay, and it probably won Editing as the fourth one. Yes. Did I get that right completely? Because this is top rated movie number 40. Yeah, let me see here. And where does Kramer place on top movies? It doesn't. That's kind of surprising to me. And yeah, I got them all right, but yep, Thelma Schoonmaker, best Best editing. That movie is messy. Um, but um, but yeah. Anyways, Forrest Gump, which I started and skipped over. Why? Because who hasn't seen this movie? Um, Young kids, quote unquote, people in their 20s wanted to start this thing that like, yeah, this movie is actually terrible, and it's not. It's just like an Odyssey, top rated movie, number 11 on IMDb. Tom Hanks is so great in this movie. The movie would fall apart without him. He does an accent that is different but works. Eric Roth's script is good, where it basically has Tom Hanks run through culture of boomer culture highlights. It basically taught me American history, 20th century American history. And Robin Wright runs through the counterculture movement of like hippies and whatnot. Uh, and Gary Sinise was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for playing Lieutenant Dan. Um, yeah, just a great movie of like, this happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens, which on its face shouldn't be a good screenplay, and wasn't to begin with, because it's based on a book by Winston Groom. Winston Groom had it in his contract that when he sold the rights, he'd get first crack at a screenplay. He writes the screenplay. It's terrible, but you can watch this episode on Netflix's The Movies That Made Us, Forrest Gump, where basically the through line of this movie of Forrest being left by Jenny. Um, this one guy who's like, they have interns who dig through screenplays and, is this good? Is this good? Is this a pass? Do we have this? Pass through it. And this guy who's like an intern reads the crappy screenplay of Forrest Gump and is like, but I had a girl named Jenny who left me or whatever. So he was like wistful about it. So he goes to the producer, and the producer makes it, and they fall in love or something like that. And then they give it to Eric Roth, who's like a great screenwriter. He wrote, Dune and Killers of the Flower Moon. And he's like a very well paid screenwriter because he's very good, like one of the best. So yeah, he won for Best Adapted Screenplay. Robert Zemeckis, who made Back to the Future, um, and this, and Castaway, and a movie called Flight, which is pretty cool. Um, they won. Tom Hanks won in back-to-back years. He won for like the second year in a row, which had only been done once before, and then it won Best Picture. So yeah, 4 Oscars, totally watchable movie. If you know nothing about American culture, you'll feel like you know everything after watching this movie. And it won 6 Oscars. So what are the two that I'm missing? Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and then it was nominated for cinematography by Don Burgess, good guy. Understand why it didn't win. Rick Carter, amazing for art direction, didn't win. Best sound didn't win, but like great sound mixing. Uh, Editing, Arthur Schmidt, makes complete sense. And then best special effects, again, makes complete sense. And then it's also nominated for best makeup, best score by Alan Silvestri, great score, and sound effects, of course. So yeah, moving on. By the way, I should say, for the amount of money that Forrest Gump made, it was like $326 million in America. I want to find out how much that movie cost, because I know it was amount. The producer Brian Grazer saw an early cut of this movie. He was shown by the head of Paramount, like, how much money do you think this is going to make? And he's something like, I don't know, 200 million. And he's like, it'll make 3 times that. And it did end up making 3 times that. It cost 55 million and made 678 million. 678 million, keep in mind, um, you know, uh, 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, it made what Dude made today, you know. So then that's not even adjusting for inflation. See, now I want to adjust for inflation. So, like, I only do in America because that's finicky. Okay. So that is, not 1979, it's 1994. Oh, 695. Okay. So it made like what a Spider-Man film would do. I don't know. Money isn't everything. So, number 3, I have The Deer Hunter, a movie I've only seen once. This movie is all build up to the final part, which, is a trick you can only pull once because the director, Michael Cimino, always thought like this is a big thing. Um, this movie won 5 Oscars, top rated IMDb movie, number 198. It won for Best Picture. De Niro was nominated for Best Actor. Christopher Walken won for Supporting Actor. Meryl Streep was nominated. It was one of her early nominees. The director, Michael Cimino, won. Was given a blank check for his next movie, blew it. Best Original Screenplay. 1, 2, 3 people are 4 people are credited on the story. 1 person with the screenplay, which is incredible. Vilmos Zsigmond for cinematography. I just remember the image of De Niro holding a flamethrower one-handed and firing it. It's about the Vietnam War, for those of you who don't know, and just basically tracks the rise and fall of it through the lives of these 3 small-town American steel workers, and led by Robert De Niro, who's the main actor, and Christopher Walken, who's another one, and they're all changed by war. And it's like a 3-hour movie, but the build-up to the end where they play Russian roulette, which we all know because of this movie, is quite good. And it ended up winning for sound, director, supporting actor, and picture. So only 4, is that correct? 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. What else did the guy who wrote this movie, did he end up making anything else? A movie called Silent Running, which I've vaguely heard of. But yeah, he hasn't done anything since 87, and he is still alive. So, people talk about when a movie is done and who gets credited and stuff. Of course, the director got credited at his own story, but there are a lot of people who Hollywood hires, like Louis Garfunkel here. He wrote a lot. Was an older writer. They usually pair an older writer with a younger writer. And then there are people who just pay to do uncredited work. It's the craziest thing. They'll give somebody money and they'll be like, okay, can you fix this up? You're not giving any credit, but we're giving you a lot of money. And they're like, oh, okay, I'll do a pass on it. And this guy, you put a couple of people together, even if they're, bozos or something, if they, if people put their heads together, everybody has, one good story in them. Almost nobody has 2. So this guy, Quinn K. Redeker, he died just actually 2 years ago. The last thing that he did, if I can go through, include everything, was he was in the archive footage of a TV show called Compression. He was also an actor on Young and the Restless. So, it's about a painter. That's kind of interesting. It's funny, there's a lot of people in Hollywood who have like background roles and stuff, like they're the background actor in this one thing and they end up being like a sound editor or something like that, or a Hollywood agent or a lawyer, like the guy who was in the Goonies, who was Chunk, the fat guy. He's in the Goonies and then ends up retiring from acting. Maybe he can't find work, maybe he doesn't like it anymore, then he becomes an entertainment lawyer, and then he writes the contract of the guy in the Goonies, Ke Huy Quan, who ends up winning Best Supporting Actor. What a fascinating career. People don't always move in straight lines, is what I'm saying. So, Deer Hunter, solid 3-hour movie. You really feel the weight of it. The number 2 movie, of course, is a 3-hour movie, or close to it, Schindler's List. Need I say more? Steven Spielberg's masterpiece. I do feel it lets up a bit at the end, but isn't that sort of every Spielberg movie? It's very good. Has a lot of great, memorable sequences to it. It's well acted. It is what I think of when I think of the Holocaust. It's pretty much what everybody thinks of when they think of the Holocaust. Um, Ray Fiennes is in it. Liam Neeson is quite fine in it. I would have probably given it to him for Best Actor that year, other than because Tom Hanks won that year for Philadelphia. Um, and he basically won for Philadelphia because it's like, oh, look, Tom Hanks being serious. This is new. This is interesting. And it was back when people would try one thing serious and then never again. That movie was like a mild success. So they ended up giving Tom Hanks Best Actor. And then he gives us his actual best role the next year. And they're like, well, we have to give it to him. And then he does Castaway. And they're like, well, we can't give him a third one. So they don't give it to him. Really, what they should have done is they should have given it to him for Forrest Gump and Castaway, but they gave it to him too early because they're like, well, he can't do better than this. And it's like, okay, guys, what if Cillian Murphy comes out with two, like, the next role after this and he's better? Like, shouldn't you give it to him? And they're like, well, no, we gave it to him really recently. It's like, the Oscars never gives out who is the best. It's always whose time it is. But yeah, it's so funny. I feel like when you get to these movies, you don't really need to say a lot. You don't really need to say a lot at all. What can there be said about Schindler's List? It's the number 6 movie on IMDb. It won 7 Oscars. It's I would say a masterpiece. It's so unlike any of Spielberg's other movies. He's done movies like Munich, I would say, is probably closest to Schindler's List. Very bloody movie, has great sequences in it. Not as good as Schindler's List. Won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, written by Steve Zaillian, another really great writer. You can tell because the show Ripley, he wrote it, and you're like, okay, well, this is well done. The Night of course, is my favorite piece of writing that he's done. Best cinematography, Janusz Kaminski, who I might have mentioned before, and going through Spielberg's, OVR. He basically became Spielberg's guy after this, and then art direction, set decoration, it won, and then film editing. And then, of course, John Williams' score, which, by the way, maybe I would have given to Jurassic Park. I don't know. They're both pretty good scores. But, Schindler's List evokes emotion, and that's what the best filmmaking does, evokes an emotional response. People say they think Ray Fiennes should have won. They're just saying that because he played a Nazi and they like him now. Really, the person who should have won that year, if you're going to pick somebody other than Tommy Lee Jones, and I remember this year quite well, because Tommy Lee Jones deserved it for The Fugitive. I love that character. But it's not like a heavy character, but he does make the movie. It's like a different role than what they would give for a supporting actor. Give it to Leonardo DiCaprio for What's Eating Gilbert Grape, because he'll never do better than that. And my number 1 pick, I've already mentioned it before, the movie that won the Big 5 or whatever. It is one of the best movies ever made. It's fascinating because parts of it are old-fashioned, and yet it was made over, 33 years ago. It is about a young FBI cadet who must receive the help of an incarcerated and manipulative cannibal killer to help catch another serial killer, a madman who skins his victims in The Silence of the Lambs, based on the novel by Thomas Harris, adapted by Ted Talley, directed by Jonathan Demme, starring Jodie Foster in her second Academy Award-winning performance, and Anthony Hopkins in his first. Watched this movie as a kid, and I didn't think it was that scary. People said it scared the crap out of them. So I thought it was like a horror movie or something. It's not. It's a thriller. It's just incredibly well done. And when I watched it for the second time in film class, I was like, I don't want to watch a movie I haven't already seen. And I realized that, there is not a frame in that movie that is wasted. Every single part of it clicks. Every scene has a purpose. Every line, every intention, every shot it is one of the best movies ever made, which is why it won Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, Best Screenplay, in one of the few other sweeps. The other, you know, close being Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I don't like, but that just had the movie of the moment energy. I honestly don't know why that movie won so much, but this movie absolutely deserves it, and that's why it is my number one list for all time Best Picture ranking. So, yes, that is my list. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Thank you for listening to episode 321. Sorry I had to delete the earlier episode. Sometimes you just got to keep a little bit for yourself. Um, and so we'll be back at least next week with another recap of the box office. That will be after Fall Guy opens, the Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt movie. So stay tuned.